Welcome to Status Check with Spivey, where we talk about life, law school admissions, a little bit of everything. This is Mike Spivey. I'm the CEO and founder of the Spivey Consulting Group. Today, I have the great pleasure of being with Mitch Leff. Mitch is looking into legally changing his last name to Mitch Motivates, which will give you an idea of what category we're in today. Mitch got sober in college. Another way of wording this would be Mitch never legally had a drink inside the United States. So he became addicted to alcohol and then later cocaine, starting around the age of 15, and got sober when he was in college. First, he started in Indiana, then at Ruckers. Why are we interviewing Mitch? The legal profession has an incredible problem with substance abuse. And not just the legal profession, but there's a lot of evidence that people going to law school much happier, less prone to things like addiction and depression than when they leave law school. So if anyone, like Mitch, could cut it off at the college level, this is a healthy podcast. I will say it can be graphic and maybe intense in stories at times. So if this isn't a problem for you, it very much is a problem for the legal community. If it is something that you've been thinking about addressing, I think Mitch has incredible words to tell. There's an inflection point in this podcast. What did the anesthetizing of the pain do for Mitch when he had his first drink? And then what did he replace substances with to not feel the nervousness, the anxiety, the pain later in life? Without further delay, this is me with Mitch Leff.
Hey, Mitch. Great to see you in person.
Hi, Mike.
I don't do many of these in person. I got to tell you, post-COVID, it's all Zoom.
I'm grateful to meet you. We just took an amazing hike.
Yeah, my hometown.
Nature, beautiful.
Yeah. The best thinking for evolutionary reasons comes when you're moving. There's a lot of science behind it. So if we could have podcasted while we were hiking, that would have been nice.
A walk and talk?
Yeah, exactly. But I think the powers that be in my life would not have approved that. So thank you for joining. You have a story you told in your book and on our hike.
Yes.
About a Chinese farmer. You want to start there?
Would love to. So I heard this story once. I'm going to do my best to repeat it to you. And it sums up this theme of my life about addiction and recovery. There's this farmer, and he has 2 horses. One day, one of the horses runs away. The whole town comes to his house that night, and he goes, "Oh no, now you only have 1 horse." And the farmer goes, "Good news or bad news? We'll see." The next day, what happens? The horse comes back, but he brings a horse friend. So now the farmer has 3 horses. The people in the town, they come back to his house, and they go, "Oh, what good news, now you have 3 horses." And the farmer goes, "Good news or bad news? We'll see." The next day, the son of the farmer goes on the new horse, and he wants to ride it around to help train the new horse. And the son falls off the horse and hurts his back. So, oh no, everyone from the town comes back to his house again. And they go, "What bad news? Your son hurt himself." And the Chinese farmer goes, "Good news, bad news, we'll see." And the next day, the town constable comes to the farmer and goes, "I'm taking all able-bodied men to fight in this foreign war." And he's like, "Well, my son can't go. He just hurt himself." And the guy goes, "Okay," and he leaves. And later that night, the town comes back to his house again. And he goes, "What good news? Your son's life may have been saved. He doesn't have to fight in this war." The point of this is that it can go on and on and on.
The farmer, I'm sure, said, "We'll see."
Yes.
Right.
And if you subscribe to this idea of it's not good news, bad news, we'll see, you learn that nothing is really bad news and everything is eventually good news. And if you look back on my life, I'll paint a picture. I was 18 years old. I had failed out of college. I had ran away. My parents had filed a missing persons report. Then they found me, and I admitted I had a drug problem. And I admitted I had a problem with alcohol and substances. And a week later, I was in rehab.
Well, you admitted, but they knew, obviously, right?
They didn't know to the extent until they filed a missing persons report.
Right.
But the point is, back to the Chinese farmer, that I got sent to rehab a week before my 19th birthday. At the time, I thought it was the worst thing ever.
You were a college student at IU Bloomington.
But looking back now, that is the defining moment of my life. I'm 37. So over the past 19 years, that's good news because that led me down this path that now I'm sober and I could help others.
From my perspective, where I sit, and from our listeners' perspective, we're talking in the tens of thousands. I've been doing what I do for 26 years. I can't tell you how many people applying to college, applying to law school, they say, "I want to go to Harvard or Yale. That's my dream school." Now, the vast majority of people applying to college and law school don't get into their dream school. You want to pick schools you don't get into, or you're not shooting high enough.
Yeah.
less than 1% of applicants are above both schools' median GPA and LSAT score. So almost by definition, 99% are catching lightning in a bottle if they get into those schools. You're going to get some rejections. They call them, I call them denials. They're not rejections. Point being is, just wait. I started my career at Vanderbilt Law School. So many students would come to Vanderbilt and say, oh, Dean Spivey, after my 1L year, I'm going to transfer to Duke or Harvard. But hardly any ever ended up doing that because just like your story, good news. They made friends, connections, fell in love, enjoyed their professors, fell in love with the city. They never wanted to leave. And it surprised them. Probably surprised you that going to rehab your freshman year in college is the best thing to happen to you.
That's why I love that. And let me tell some of my story. I want to start in high school. Here I am. I'm a nerd. I play video games on Friday night for fun. I'm in the marching band. And I was desperately seeking something to make people notice me. And I'm in my basement of my friend's house. His parents are gone. My dad has a couple beers in the fridge. Let's take one. And I've never drank alone at this point. I'll give a little analogy to what that first drink was like for me. It was like a warm apple pie with ice cream on a summer day. That feeling of, oh my God, this is good.
I think most people find alcohol repulsive, but we just learn to like it. It tasted good to you too?
Everything about it. I felt warm inside. The first drink I'm out.
It made you feel good.
Simply because I'm an addict, and when I ingest substances in any shape or form, I abuse them. What this led me to is a very deep, dark place the next couple of years that we say you turn from a cucumber into a pickle. I abuse substances. And at first it was the alcohol. But afterwards, you're in high school, you can't buy it legally. So I had to steal it, steal bottles of wine from friends' parents, take in my parents' house some liquor out of their liquor.
So I did that as a kid when I was in senior year high school a couple times.
Yeah.
Everyone's done the water and the vodka. But what you were doing, which I think is a step much further than most people, is you were going to your friend's house and stealing their parents' liquor.
Yeah, it didn't matter. I had a goal. The goal was to get drunk, to get alcohol at that point, and nothing mattered.
You would have walked into a bar, ordered a shot, done a shot, and run. I knew someone who used to do that all the time because they were so deep in their addiction.
Yeah. Fun fact, I've never had a legal drink in America. I think only in like Jamaica and the Bahamas I've had a legal drink.
Because you could be 19.
There's actually an AA group in New York City called Never Had a Legal Drink, and it's full of young people in recovery. That's me. But it progressed very quickly, the progression of addiction. It was easier for me to get drugs, so I started smoking a lot of weed. The drug dealer doesn't card, a liquor store cards.
Right.
So I started smoking weed. What came with the constant smoking of weed was a lifestyle change, and I started making new friends. I started making groups of friends, usually younger girls, and they all like to smoke weed. But me, I would see each one of those groups every day. So they would smoke weed once a day. I would smoke 4 or 5
Right, you were with each group.
And that comes with changing clothes, changing how I acted, changing friends. I started cheating and plagiarizing in high school because I wasn't studying for tests or anything. I wasn't doing papers. I was getting high.
And none of this was a red flag.
No, it just seemed normal.
It felt good, right?
But it felt good. It felt like I was starting to develop a reputation. If you needed weed, go to Mitch.
Right.
And I got attention. If you were like a younger person, go see Mitch. He'll smoke you out. We'll do drugs, whatever.
Right.
One of those groups introduced me to cocaine, and that was my downfall. And I would do it the same way I drank, the same way I did the alcohol. I would pick and choose who I hung out with because they were doing the same thing that I was doing. And we would get high. And this girls that I would smoke weed with, she said that she had recently tried coke, and she asked me if I wanted to try it. And when I tried that, it was like, oh my God, this is better than the weed. This is better than the alcohol. This is what I'm doing. And I did it the same way I was doing the weed, during school, after school, before a family dinner. It didn't matter. Getting high quickly became the focal point of my life.
Would you say that in that period of your life, you're 16, 17, whatever, most of your family dinners, you were either stoned, drunk, or high on cocaine?
Yes.
And your parents had no idea?
No idea. And it's funny, you asked when they filed the missing persons report before I went to rehab, did they know? I have had flashbacks of my mother looking at me and go, and my mother's name is Andrea, my father's name is Larry. Larry, Mitchell's high. Can't you see? Look at his eyes.
Right.
I mean, Visine, I always had it on me, and cologne. But so anyway, I quickly progressed. Flash forward, graduation night from high school. I'm doing drugs all day. High out of my mind. Coked out of my mind. Didn't eat. We're on the way to celebrate graduation from high school. I don't know how I passed.
You were at the stage, right?
Yeah. I had gotten to Indiana University, and I was going there because it was a party school.
Well, it's a good school, too. How did you get in?
I don't know, but I got in. So I was going to Indiana, and I didn't, no cares in the world, and all I was doing was just drugs all the time at this point. graduation from high school. We're on the way to a graduation party, and we stop at 7-Eleven. And we're pulling away from the 7-Eleven. We got Gatorades to go to the graduation party. And a cop cuts us off and get arrested. Someone had saw us getting high in the parking lot of 7-Eleven, called the police on us, and as we're leaving, they come and they cut us off. So the graduation night from high school, I was handcuffed to a chair for hours. That's how I started the summer before college. It's usually like the best time in people's lives.
Right,
you go to college, you get a job, and here I was like, just got arrested. Parents didn't trust me. It's funny, years later, I was listening to the podcaster and media personality, Gary Vee. He worked at this place called Wine Library, which is in Springfield, New Jersey, across the street from the 7-Eleven where I got arrested.
Right. So that wasn't the wake-up call.
No, that was the beginning of the end. And that year, I didn't care about anything. I used, and that was my job. I didn't go to class. I looked for drug dealers and looked for parties.
Right.
I became a degenerate, meaning I would wear the same clothes for a couple days in a row. I didn't really need to eat because I was doing so much cocaine that it's a food suppressant. I didn't really need to eat. I was spending all my money on drugs, and I was stealing when the drugs ran out. I was stealing textbooks from school. I would go to the bookstore and sell someone else's textbook that I stole.
Half the people listening to this are going to be lawyers. They're going to like retroactively litigate against you. I'm kidding. You can't.
It's okay. Statute of limitation. That was 2006.
Right. I wouldn't have brought that up. But so you're stealing books? Are you stealing computers and laptops and things?
It's funny you say that. I had a Dell computer that my parents bought me to go to college. I was such a degenerate and so good at lying and cheating and stealing at this point because my goal was just to get high. I sold the same computer twice. I sold it to someone and he gave me money. And then I said that I needed to get it fixed. So I'll give it to him tomorrow.
Yeah.
I was like, it's getting fixed, but I need the money today. And then the next day I sold it to someone else.
What did the first guy do?
I was dodging him and avoiding him. And I remember I had a drug dealer that I owed money to and he came looking for me and I gave him an iPod. I gave him a printer. You get creative when you owe people money and they're coming after you, Mike. It really is like the movies. Yeah, I hit a bottom. And my bottom was April of my freshman year. I had not gone to class. My GPA was 0. I don't know how I convinced my parents to send me back for second semester. I ended up going back to Jersey in April. I grew up in New Jersey. And I went home and I ended up running away from home. My family was gathering. It was like an event in our family. We were just all seeing each other. And I ran away from home. A couple days go by. It's Sunday morning. And my dad's calling me. My uncle's calling me. They don't know where I am. And they filed a missing persons report like the back of a milk cart.
Right.
And I think they found me because I stole my dad's credit card and they tracked down the credit card to use to pay for the room.
You were in a hotel?
Yeah, a motel in New Jersey. And hear a knock on the door. 5 police officers. And I broke down when I saw them because I knew the jig was up. They took me to a hospital. That's what happens when you find a missing person. IVs in my arm. My family came to the hospital. And that's when I said, I have a problem. I can't stop using drugs. I need help.
Was that a weight off your shoulders, to be honest with you?
Oh my God, yes. Yeah. A week later, I was in treatment and that started my journey of recovery.
You relapsed a couple times,
yes.
I imagine.
The first 2 years were difficult.
I've done enough interviews with addiction experts. Gabor Mate's book was 1,000 freaking pages. Almost everyone who gets sober relapses. I'm interested in the final time, and then I'm interested in why we think it was the final time. So your final time you ever used any intoxicant
was the end of August 2008. I went to rehab and I started to develop a community of sober people in recovery. So I started to develop these tools. It was very hard. You could be doing the right thing and one thing you're not doing. I remember I met a girl, she was doing drugs. She wasn't the best person I should have been dating. And even though I was like living with sober people at the time, this is my first relapse, 8 months in. I leave rehab, I leave a sober living, I'm living in the Poconos, I'm going into community college part-time. I'm a waiter and I'm starting to make money. I'm sending money to my parents to start to pay them back. I'm doing a lot of right things. But here I am in this area of my love life and I just was all over the place. And I meet this girl and she does drugs and it's very appealing. For her birthday, we got a hotel room and cocaine. And that was one of my first relapses. Right. But I kept coming back.
At this point, you're coming back to 2 things, Mitch. You're coming back to rehab, but you're also coming back to substances.
Yes. And I credit Ruckers University. They have a program for students in recovery. And I was living in a dorm for students in recovery. But it's not just a sober dorm. They have a program. And I had a best supporting community. And I remember my friends at the time were alumni that went through the dorm, graduated Ruckers, are sober, and were living in the area of New Brunswick. So it was always so valuable to me.
Well, let me just click on this because this is really important for people listening. The vast majority are in college. Mitch got sober and never relapsed after in college.
Yes.
You don't have to wait till you're 30 and living on the streets.
Yeah, and I'm looking back, the alumni of Sober Dorm that were still living in the area, that was like the number one success I had because they were mentors. I saw them able to get sober in college and graduate. They had jobs. I was like, these guys are awesome. Because if you see someone do something, you can do it too. That's why I'm here sharing my story.
That whole thing, going through times in my life, Hell Week in football, which people call them 2 days and 3 days. Our Hell Week was 6 a.m. to like 9 p.m.
Wow.
And I'm like, I kept thinking to myself, how many hundreds of people before me got through this?
Yeah.
6 a.m. to 9 p.m. sucked. And then later in life, the responsibilities and challenges get a lot more harder than high school athletics.
Yeah.
What I say to myself is, okay, well, I had this huge thing hanging over me, this health issue or whatever, people dying in my life, whatever it is. But other people have endured the same, so if they can, I can too.
I want to fast forward to August. I had taken a trip that past summer. I drank on the trip, and I was like, I'm in the Middle East, halfway across the world. No one's going to know, so I drank. And then I got home, and I was working with a psychiatrist, and I was lying to him about how the medication he was prescribing me made me feel, and I was abusing the medication. And it was speed, basically, for me. And I would take a bottle that said 30-day supply in a day or two.
Would you be sober for 28 days?
Again, like a good addict, I lost the medication. I left it in a cab. I mean, you can name it. Any excuse I've done.
I have to take Valium for clenching my teeth from time to time. And in 12 years, I lost a bottle once. I put it in the hotel and just left. And even that one time, I thought my doctor was going to be like, no way. Right away. Did you?
I was lying. I was abusing the speed medication. I was living in the recovery dorm at Ruckers at the time. And I was hanging out that night with some of the alumni at one of their apartments in the area. And I remember just like passing out on a Friday. We're all hanging out watching TV, playing board games, fantasy football. We had so much fun stuff we used to do. And I was high. That was the last time I used. And I remember it was Beijing, China, was on the TV. It was a closing ceremony of the Beijing Olympics in 2008. And I saw David Beckham on a double-decker bus talking about the 2012 Olympics in London. And what happened is the next day, one of them was like, we're going to a meeting. And I was like, let's go. And I just kept showing up. And I had to look back years later on YouTube. When was the closing ceremony of the Beijing Olympics? August 24th, 2008. And the next day, the 25th, is my sobriety date.
This actually has to do with addiction, but it has to do with everything, including getting denied from your dream schools or rejected when you ask someone out on a date. Life is a series of asking people for permission. You're going to hear yes and no throughout your life.
Yes.
You're probably going to hear no a lot more than you hear yes. You were this kid who was nervous, so you would play video games versus talk to people. But once you had that first drink of alcohol, you were able to talk to people because you didn't feel the rejection anymore.
Spot on.
Obviously, the day you stop, you still have this belief system that you're not lovable or whatever. So it didn't happen the day you stopped. And what I'm hugely interested in for everyone listening is, over time, what did you replace this need for substances to not feel rejected with? What was the antidote?
The antidote, it's so clear to me today, is love and service and community. The community of people came first, back to when I went to rehab. When you go to rehab, they come to your room and you introduce yourself to the community. They go, what's your drug of choice? It's a big word in rehab. What's your drug of choice?
What's interesting is it all hits the same reward, your dopaminergic pathway.
Yes.
Why would your drug of choice be cocaine and mine be running? And the theory is, for evolutionary reasons, if we all had the same drug of choice, we would all kill each other for the same strawberry patch. So we all have different drugs, but they don't know why.
So I say cocaine. Half the people in the rehab were like, yeah. And then the heroin guys were like, boom. So since that moment, I was like, I found my community. Having had a lot of experience with recovery, 12-step, sober dorm, this, that, you learn that the point of the recovery community, its foundation is love and service. You have gone down this terrible path, but you surround yourself with others who have, and then they're just trying to do better.
Yeah.
And then you get better through love and service.
I'll go to Dr. Gabor Mate, who we had on our podcast. The issue isn't addiction. He asked me straight up, Mike, is it natural to want to alleviate pain? Of course it's natural.
Yeah.
The issue isn't the alcohol or the cocaine or the pills. Those are taking away the pain. The issue is the underlying pain. And your underlying pain was you felt rejected and insecure and anxious.
Yes.
And what replaced the substances, because Dr. Mate argues we're all addicts until we fix our belief system, was a sense of community that people cared about you.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah.
People cared about you was the antidote.
Yeah, and like I said, the day after my relapse, the guys were like, let's just go to a meeting today. What are you doing? It was just a normal day. But they just kept that attitude and I just kept coming.
Yeah. That was your community.
Yep. I had the tools at that point when I graduated Ruckers to understand that there was 2 places I would live only. New York City, because there was so many young people in recovery, or I was going to stay at Ruckers. And my mom is a graduate of Ruckers. This is interesting because it ties into what you do. If you had said, I looked down on the State University of New Jersey my whole life. My mom went there. I don't want to stay in New Jersey. I'm 45 minutes from my parents. This is not where
Very classic, by the way.
I want to go out. I want to go to Indiana. The football team, the Hoosiers, come on.
Yeah, or USC would make sense.
Or like Miami for the sunshine.
Yeah, I was just there 2 days ago.
But I was led down this path that I ended up being at Ruckers for 3.5 years and loving it. And that helped me get and stay sober. And that's a huge part of my foundation of my recovery.
Yeah.
It's like you never know.
So I noticed in your book that I read, the start of so many chapters, you're like, Greg was a great guy. Paul was a great guy. So you're constantly looking for mentors. And now it makes sense to me. What you're really doing is looking for allies who are part of your community, who have your back. What would you say to the person listening who's like, yeah, great for Mitch. I'm an introvert. I'm shy. I don't have a community.
Look, it's 2024. There is a community for every type of person ever. There's a podcast for every type of community ever. I don't believe that. I would push back on someone that say they don't have the community. There's probably a community for introverts that like playing chess while dressing up like superheroes.
My podcast started as an admissions podcast. A lot of people who aren't familiar with colleges would say, what? There's a podcast on admissions?
Exactly.
Law schools? I have a friend with a very incredibly rare neurological progressive disorder, and there's Facebook groups for that.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of the most extreme example of like a club. Like, I only drink Pepsi, not Coke. There's probably a podcast.
And I have pet squirrels. You could even add that. There's probably a community for I drink Pepsi and my pet is a squirrel. Back to grounding.
Yeah.
Your point is, all right, you're shy. Find it online. You've probably done hundreds of online AA meetings. Am I right?
Especially during the pandemic.
Okay.
When went full force Zoom.
Yeah.
But back to the community. The reason I moved to New York, like I said, is because of the community. And right away, I'm like looking for mentors. We say we follow the paths of giants in recovery, the people that walk the path first. I was just trained to look for them. And Paul, who I share about in the book.
Yeah, there's a whole chapter. This was a powerful chapter.
He had moved to New York and he was going to meetings, so I knew about him. He was playing sober softball on Sundays, so I knew to do that. He was living the life I wanted to. And he was working for like an investment bank and then later a hedge fund. Like he was working. So I just knew that I had people to show me the ropes. And I'll tell a little bit about his story in a nutshell. He was like, I thought, the perfect person. Right. From mainline Pennsylvania, exactly like where I grew up in Short Hills, New Jersey. Kind of like where I live now in Greenwich, Connecticut.
Right.
He had a beautiful fiance when I met him. He was the RA of the sober dorm, and he had a internship for an investment bank, and he was about to work in New York City. He was like all-American.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong.
Yeah. Seemingly, which is the funny thing.
And years later to find out that this addiction, this mental illness is so powerful, even Paul succumbed to the disease. And what happened is that he put all that stuff first before his recovery. Anything you put in front of your recovery, you're going to lose. And he was doing all these flashy things that he saw other people doing, trips to Thailand, Super Bowls. He even did that in his own personal life. He had this beautiful wife at the time I went to his wedding, Lisa. They got a divorce and he was dating someone else. And he was putting all this stuff before his recovery. Right. And I met him a couple years later after he started to change and he had relapsed. He had gotten into trouble with the law because of his relapse. And he told me, all the money I've ever made, I'm spending on legal fees to maybe not go to jail. A week later, I got a text. It said, Paul had overdosed and died. And this is so powerful. And I say this to people when I work with people and I meet these like very high profile people and successful people. It's the oxygen mask on the airplane. You have to put it over yourself first before you put it on your loved one.
100%. Like, it's almost cliche because I'm in the self-help field. I have a second book coming out all about that. You hear it from every self-help expert, but I swear to goodness, if you're applying to college, if you're applying law school and you're doing it for your parents or your friends or because the people in your town or the people online tell you should go to this law school, no, you need to go to the school that's best for you. You need to put yourself first in everything. And here's how I think of it. Does that sound selfish? Heck no. The more you put yourself first, the better you become. It's happened to me in my life. The better I become as a person, the more I can help other people.
Yes. And that's what led me to wanting to write the book.
And congrats on having it published. We met because I walked into a bookstore and saw your book and picked it up, and the people at the bookstore said, oh, you're an author, he's an author. Let's get you two in touch.
And I was grateful, and that's just a testament to how valuable it is to share your story, because you never know who's listening. In this case, you never know who's reading, but it's the same thing. It's why I love being on and doing podcasts and sharing my story. You never know who's listening, and you never know how your experience can be helpful to someone else.
It's worth us spending an hour or 2 hours together to change one person's life. There was something towards the end of your book, and then we'll get to sort of what you do, that really, I didn't know this, and it really stood out to me. In the book, you said during COVID, they closed AA meetings down in person, but they kept liquor stores open as a necessity, which is fucked up, and I hardly ever swear. And then you told me in person, they also closed churches down, but they kept liquor stores open.
In-person liquor stores were essential businesses. It's just funny that, to me, it's a lesson on one, the priorities sometimes is so messed up of other people.
So at a societal level, we think we've come so far. Oh, we don't label addiction as a moral, we label it as a disease, but we still have so far to go.
Yes, but we have come a long way. And I like to just think to the future and think maybe a couple years ago, a podcast about addiction, mental health, it wasn't as big.
20 years ago, no one would want to talk about it.
So I just use that as fuel today to keep on going and to say, you know what, if an in-person AA meeting is closed, let me show you how to look up a couple Zoom meetings. If your church that you go to every Sunday and that gives you the community, whatever gives you the community, here's another way to do it. In recovery, you're used to pivoting and keeping on moving forward.
Yeah. Some people listening have never touched a substance before, but they will, and some of those will become addicts. Some people listening probably do have a problem already. If you do have a problem, I do not believe in this concept of rock bottom. Rock bottom is death. You can quit at any time before death, and the sooner the better. You had a notion at some point when you were stealing, or maybe when you were in college and failing, I'm hanging out with all these people and I'm the worst of them all. I'm the one changing clothes and going from group to group. If you're doing that now, this is the time to stop. Don't wait for rock bottom.
It's one of the chapters in my book. It's never too early to ask for help.
There you go.
And I make it clear, it's never too early to ask for help.
Email Mitch. We're going to put his website on our show notes. If you need help, email Mitch. Or someone. It doesn't have to be Mitch. It can be your best friend. It can be your parents. Tell someone. This stuff dies in the light and it grows in the dark.
Yes. That's why I have a little chuckle when I smile and I see like fitness influencers sharing about like, oh, it's dry January, it's sober October. They're just now finding out the benefits of being sober.
Right.
No, I've felt like that for the past 19 years.
Yeah.
But now they're just finding out. So that's why it's never too early to ask for help, because being sober is a superpower.
Yeah.
I can't even stress that enough.
Yeah.
And that's why I named my book, My Addiction, My Superpower. Because what I do today is I share about my superpower, my addiction, and I help others find theirs. The methods that I do that, how do I do that? Positivity, vulnerability, and honesty.
You're telling your whole story and you felt horrible when you hid it from people. When you relapsed, you hid it from everyone. I could tell from reading your book.
Yeah.
You hated those lies.
And that's what I'm on my mission to do, to help people find their superpower.
Yeah.
And that's when I wrote this book, to share the message that you can do anything. How to find me, MitchMotivates.com. Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Mitch Motivates. I try to keep it as simple as possible. I'm about to probably legally change my...
Yeah, your name is Mitch Leff, but you wanted to be Mitch Motivates.
Yeah, from
change it. Change it legally.
Yeah,
that'd be cool.
Madonna.
We'll get one of our listeners to change it legally. We have lawyers who listen to our podcast.
We should do a contest, because I want people without cheating to tell me Madonna's last name.
Someone listening, email info@spiveyconsulting.com. If you have the ability to legally change a name, we'll get your name changed to Motivates. A little weird, but a little cool. Mr. Motivates. I like it. Here's my final takeaway. Obviously, a lot of people listening aren't struggling with a substance abuse issue. You want to go to law school. The bigger global level picture to me is we all probably have a belief system from our childhood about something about ourselves that's not helpful as an adult. And a lot of it manifests in rejection, feeling rejected. And boy, do I see it. Boy, does my firm see it. There's a lot of us that are firm. We see it so much at the level of these high achievers. I mean, you were, believe it or not, you got into a selective school. So in some sense, you were a high achiever, even though you were self-medicating. High achievers who have never been rejected before. To you, it was, you felt rejected all the time until liquor, until alcohol, until ethanol, the molecule. But they've never been denied, rejected, and they get their first college denial or their first law school denial, and the world seems like it's crashing down. Your life is no different. It's the farmer story. Your life is no different. It's the same that we began with. Find a community, find people that love you, find people that love you as much if you go to freaking Penn as if you went to Harvard or Yale, or if you go to Drexel or Toro. I guarantee you your future self has nothing to do with the definition of what's the great thing that you did at 18 years old. We were talking about this. You were like, how do these kids have to make decisions at 18? It's a tough decision, but you do have to make a decision, but that's not going to define who your future is. I've had so many students of mine when I was a dean of 2 law schools, didn't get jobs, Great Recession, and now they're killing it as these like high-end, super impressive people. And they thought their life was over during the Great Recession when no one was getting jobs.
We talked about that, and I'm just a big proponent. We could have just ended the podcast after the Chinese farmer story.
Yeah.
Good news, bad news, we'll see. And my life, I thought it was over, has led me to have a book, My Addiction, My Superpower, that you can buy on Amazon. Dad's crazy.
Yeah.
It's in select bookstores.
Yeah,
It's how we came together.
Yep.
Because you went in and bought my book, but you can buy this on Amazon.com. My Addiction, My Superpower.
Mitch, thanks for your time.
Mike, I'm so grateful that you had me on. Thank you for you and your team for inviting me, and it's been such a pleasure. I'm grateful to you. Thank you.